Welcome, Pastor, as he comes to bring the word today. We hardly ever do anything or preach a different kind of sermon around here, but I don't preach what everybody else preaches. No need in that. You can get that anywhere. The sermon today is You Always Can Until You Can't. All we have is today. There are no yesterdays, and we have no promise of tomorrow. All we have is what we have today. And I know you're busy. I know all the important things you've got to do and work and busy. All the important plans you have for the future. And I'm aware of all of your good intentions, what you plan to do someday. But listen to a couple of verses. In James 4, verses 13 and 14, the apostle said, Don't say what you're going to do or what you're not going to do tomorrow. Now I'm sort of paraphrasing this. Because you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. And what is your life? It is but a vapor that appears for a little while, and then it's gone. You look back on life and you wonder, how quickly did I get here? You wake up one day and you're old. You wonder how you got to be so old so quick. I heard a song, first time I had ever heard it. It's been around a long time, but I had never heard it. It was by Cody Johnson. And it's titled, Til You Can't. And he's got 4 verses in him. A couple of them didn't mean a thing to me, but I'm sure they were personal to him. But one of the verses that struck me so hard, he says, your dad wants you to go fishing. But you can't. You're too busy. You've got too many important things to do. Got too much on your plate to cast a bait. But you always can until you can't. And he had another one about a phone call from your mom. And you sort of cringe and sort of hate to answer the call, because you know she's going to talk on and on and on and on and on. And want to know about the grandkids and everybody else that you've ever known and tell stories you've already heard. Take the call, because you don't know how you'll miss them when you can't. You always can until you can't. Talking to one of my sons the other day, and he said, you know, Dad, I have lots of regrets in my life. I said, so do I. And he said, well, Dad, what could you possibly regret in your life? I have not always been a good person. In fact, I don't consider myself a good person now. I don't know why you put up with me. But I don't know why I put up with you either, so it's fair play. But I have regrets. And I said, well, I've done some things that were not good, but I don't regret those as bad as the things that I didn't do. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, when I went into the ministry, I went in whole hog or die. You know me. If I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. And I spent so much time with ministry, church, that I didn't have the time to spend with my kids. And I regret that. I don't feel like at times I was a very good dad to my kids. I remember overhearing a conversation between Jeremy. I don't know, he was pretty well grown. And I think he was talking to Melody, his sister. And some kids were playing catch, baseball. I overheard this. He said, "You know, I have never played catch with my dad." Now, we always had basketballs and footballs and ball gloves and baseballs around the house. So I found a couple of gloves and a baseball. And I went out. And Jeremy and I played catch. I had never played catch with my son. He was pretty well grown. And Jock and Jess been wanting to move down into the country. And I said, "I think that's a great idea." I said, "I think your kids need to learn some life lessons." I said, "You know, they may want to go cut their own Christmas tree and help decorate it." I said, "They need to do something besides sit in their own rooms playing video games. They need to learn how to do some things." And he immediately said, "I remember the first time you told me to go cut a Christmas tree." He must have been 11 or 12 years old. And he had to walk a long ways to find a cedar tree. I love cedar trees for Christmas. They put such a good smell in the house. Everything's artificial, phony, fake anymore. Even most of the preaching you hear is fake. I don't know how I wound up going there, but anyway, I'm not going there today. Anyway, he went and he found this tree and he come dragging it in. And he said that was a straggly tree. And it was, oh my God. That was I don't know how he could find one a cedar tree that straggly. He brought it in, and Joe looked at me, I looked at her, and I said, "Okay, come on, son, let's build a stand for it," because we didn't have Christmas tree stand then. So we went and built one, and Joe went to work on that tree. And when she got through, it was gorgeous. Lit the lights, had a big star on top of it. And Jock looked at me and he said, "I did good, didn't I, Dad?" Wow. What about all of the wonderful things you plan to do with your kids someday? You always can until you can't. What about all of the wonderful things you know you need to say to your mate, but you just don't take time to do it? Learn you take one another for granted. You just don't have time. You always can until you can't. A little poem I'm sure you're familiar with. Mr. Meant To has a twin. His name is Didn't Do. Have you ever chanced to meet them? Have they ever called on you? These two twins live together in the house of Never Win. I'm told that it is haunted by the ghost of might have been. Of all the sad words of tongue or pen, the saddest are these, it might have been. You always can until you can't. Let me ask you a question. I want you to take it seriously. What would you do today if you knew that when you went to sleep tonight, you were not going to wake up in the morning? What would you do? Do you think you might have time to hug your kids and tell them you're proud of them and you're glad that you are their parents? And what about your parents, young people? Do you think if you knew you were not going to wake up in the morning when you went to bed tonight, what do you think you might say to your parents? You think you might say, I'm glad that you were my parents. I love you. What would you do? You think you might get alone with your mate and just tell her how much you love her and how precious she is and how special she's been in your life. And thank you for choosing to be my wife. Well, what about going to your husband? Every once in a while, Joe will come over and she'll do this. That means get your leg down. I'm fixing to sit down. You think you might just go crawl up in your husband's lap, put your arms around him and tell him how much you love him? And thank you for choosing to be my husband. What do you think? What would you do? I look back on my life, and now I knew I had time to spend time with my mother. But I didn't have much time to spend with my dad. He died just before I turned 12. And I don't really know much about him. I don't really know much about my dad. But preparing this sermon, I thought, what would I give to just have one more day with my dad? If we would just live our lives as though each day would be our last, how much more kindness, how much more forgiveness, how much more love and praise would there be in our homes and our lives and every place that we walked? You always can until you can't. Live each day as if it was your last. And see what a difference it makes in your life. All the fussing and fighting with each other, cutting each other up with your words, leaving each other wounded. One day that mate will be gone, and one of you will be alone. Never, 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 never use the word divorce. You married till death do you part. And your kids get so wrapped up in your kids you don't have time for each other. Your kids are only yours for a little while and they're going to be gone. And you'll be lucky to get a phone call on Father's Day or Mother's Day. That mate is yours till death do you part. And one day, one of you will be gone, and you'll go through the empty nest syndrome. I never did. I was glad to see mine go. Just get on. I didn't have no empty nest. You may as well relax. It's going to get worse as we go along. Talking about divorce. Well, we'll just get a divorce. Heading for the door. That would work about one time with me. And the next time I'd have her bags packed and sitting outside with the door locked and the key changed. You heading for the door, you gone, honey. Well, I'll just quit church. No! You still love me? We're not through yet. What about the plans you plan to do for God? You're going to. I know you're going to. You're just too busy. Too many important things that you've got to get done. One day you'll stand before God. And how important will those things be then? Well, I'm going to do it, Pastor. I'm going to be more faithful. I'm going to be a witness. I may even work over in children's church once in a while or help with the nursery. I may even like to be a deacon one day. Listen, deacons, you have been chosen and appointed by God, by me, and by the people of this church. And you have the privilege of caring for the most important, special thing on this planet. And that's the people that Jesus died for. What about your plans to be saved? Well, I know you're going to do it. You just got those so many important things that you got to do right now. But you always can until you can't. Well, don't push me, preacher. Well, I'm going to push you. Where am I going to push you to? You're already going to hell. Am I going to push you to hell number 1, hell number 2, hell number 3? No, I'm going to push you. If you hang around here, I'm going to push you. You need to get saved. I want you to go to heaven with me. In fact, I can help send you on if you want me to. I know you plan to be saved someday. Nobody is stupid enough to plan to go to hell. The vast majority of people say, well, I plan on being saved. But you always can until you can't. I'm going to tell you a story I ran across years ago, and I may have told it here at some time in the past. I don't know. But it was written by a man named Michael Foster. And I have taken some liberties. Now, I don't know Michael Foster, don't know who he is, what he is, or nothing else. But I've taken some liberties with his story. I want you to listen. It was Tuesday morning. John Carmody sat at home looking out the window. He tried to think of all of the big, important things that he had to do just a few days ago. Somehow they didn't mean much to him today. He remembers an event seemingly insignificant at the time, but it happened 3 weeks ago. He came home from work excited, had big plans, a lot to do. He had just finished the final draft for his annual stockholders report. He wanted to give it one final reading because it was so important to his future and the future of his wife and his little girl. Came home, seated in his easy chair. He started reading softly but out loud so he could hear the ring of the words. When he was interrupted by a little voice, "Look at my new book, Daddy. Isn't it pretty?" "Yes, Margie, it's very nice. Back into the grand scheme of facts and figures." Again the little voice, "Daddy, could you read me just one little story?" "Not now, honey. Daddy's busy. Run along now." His mind turned again to the report. These were important matters for John Carmody. Again the little voice, "Daddy, look at the lovely picture. Couldn't you read me just one little story?" "Not now, honey. Daddy's busy. Some other time. Go ask your mama to read it to you." "But Daddy, Mama's busy in the kitchen." "Not now, honey. I'm busy. I'll do it some other time. Like a good little girl, Margie stood there, looking at the lovely picture. Then she reaches out and softly touches his hand. What is it now, honey? Daddy, when you have time to read me a story, would you read it to yourself? Just read it loud enough so that I can hear it too. Sure, honey, I'll do that. Now run along. Daddy's busy. Somehow, this Tuesday morning, that's all John Carmody could remember. He couldn't recall all of the big plans, which no doubt was going on at the office right now without him. He wasn't there this Tuesday morning. He was at home, looking out the window. He reached over, picked up a little book, turned the pages, and found that lovely picture. He tried to read, but his lips were stiff. His throat was choked. He almost forgot the horror and the hatred he felt towards the drunk driver who was sitting in jail charged with manslaughter. He didn't even see his wife standing at the door in her black dress, putting her gloves on. She tried to keep her voice steady as she said, I'm ready now, John. It's time to go. But John didn't hear. He was reading to himself, softly, yet out loud. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who lived in the Black Forest in a woodcutter's house. She was so fair that the birds stopped their singing when they looked at her. And then one day, softly, to himself, yet out loud, loud enough that just maybe, Margie could hear him too. Don't say what you're going to do tomorrow or what you're going to do the next day, what you could do, wouldn't do, because you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. What is your life? It's but a vapor. It's here today, and then it's gone. A lot of people sleepwalk through life, the living dead. Their life is in such a rut. They do the same thing every day. They take no time to do some important things. You know, a grave is just a rut with both ends kicked out of it. Some of you are in a rut. You're just already dead. You just don't know it. You walk through life oblivious to where the things that are really important in the eternal scheme of things. Many never wake up till they look in the coffin square between the slats. And then they realize, oh, that's what I should have done. It's too late. Ephesians 5:14, awake thou that sleepest, and arise from the dead. How many times have you heard the gospel and you never responded to the call of the Holy Spirit for you to personally accept Jesus Christ? You're asleep. When you plan on waking up? Billy Graham, I had great respect for that man. Preached a consistent gospel. But he told a story about a preacher who was asleep, and he dreamed that he was preaching a sermon in the pulpit. And he woke up, and he really was. That's not as bad, he said, as the man who dreamed he was listening to a sermon in church, and he woke up Realized he was. And then he told about John Wesley. Man went to sleep while John Wesley was preaching. And John saw him and he said, "Fire! Fire!" The man said, "Where? Where?" He said, "In hell for those who sleep while the gospel is being preached." Some of you need to wake up. You've heard the gospel time after time after time, and you just keep putting the decision off. And every time you put the Holy Spirit off, it becomes a little harder to hear Him next time. And some of you put Him off until now the gospel just doesn't penetrate. It doesn't prick your heart the way it once did. Doesn't touch you anymore. Don't say what you're going to do tomorrow or what you're not going to do, because you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. You better take care of important things today, because you have no promise of tomorrow. Boast not thyself, the wise man of Proverbs said. Boast not thyself of tomorrow, because you have no idea what's coming down the road tomorrow. Some of you live your lives like there's no end of tomorrows. You keep putting off the things you plan to do, like spend time with your kids, spend time with your mate, tell them how much you love them, how much they mean to you. Stop cutting each other up. Don't leave each other. Some of you just cut each other up, do damage. It's hard to repair that kind of damage. Some of you putting off your decision to accept Christ. And some of you have accepted Christ, but you've never really made the decision you are going to commit your life to be a follower of Jesus Christ, not just a Christian in name only. A lot of people running around calling themselves Christians who have no thought about the life that they live. Putting off your decision. Again, the apostle said, "Awake thou that sleepest, and arise from the dead." Let's pray. Close your eyes, please. Father, help us to be aware of the importance of today, and help us to live each day as if it were our last. Help us to love while there's still time to love, to give praise while there's time to praise, to encourage one another while there's time. You always can until you can't.